The origin story of Over a Cup of Coffee was a joiner that worked in the house here.
Mm.
And because I had time, I spent a lot of time talking to him. And he had left his job in software, I believe it was, to follow his passion and open this joinery business. And I was one of his first clients, I believe. And after he finished, and because we talked so much, and I was very, I'm very investigative when it comes to my curiosity, asking questions. He actually asked me, hey, would I take the time to sit with him, because he wasn't sure whether his business was viable, sustainable. And we had that conversation. So that was actually probably the first over the cup of coffee conversation I had.
Welcome to Narrative's Leadership Story Talks, where great leaders go beyond the bottom line to create lasting impact. Join hosts Jerome and Julienne Ryan as they uncover the stories behind real-world challenges, offering practical insights to help you lead with empathy, authenticity, and purpose. Each episode dives into how leaders use storytelling to build trust, foster connection, and inspire action. Whether you're navigating workplace dynamics, driving change, or building high-performing teams.
Welcome to Leadership Story Talks. I'm Jerome CEO of Narrative.
And I'm Julienne Ryan. And hello, everyone. It's great to be here.
Yeah, great to see you again, Julienne. Before we move on to introducing our guest, I want to remind our listeners and viewers to subscribe to the podcast wherever you find your podcast. Leave a review as well, because that drives word of mouth. Check out our YouTube channel so you can see us in beautiful color, and as well as narrative.com/podcast, where you can find all our previous episodes. That's NARATIV.com. So without further ado, today we are joined by Martin Koehler. Martin Koehler is German-born. He spent 25 years leading businesses across Europe, North America, and Australia, running sales, marketing, operations, and P&L through growth, transformation, and the kind of complexity that doesn't come with a playbook. When that chapter ended, he founded Over a Cup of Coffee. 1 hour, no agenda, no program, just the honest conversation that most people are avoiding with someone who has no stake in the outcome. He lives in the UK with his husband, works in English and German, and believes that the right question, asked at the right moment, changes everything. Welcome to the show, Martin.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, it's so good to have you. And in preparation for this, we had a great conversation, and I'm just really intrigued by your whole journey and how you started Over a Cup of Coffee, which I think is such a great concept. So I can't wait to get into that. Before we do, I'm going to ask you the question that we ask of all of our guests to begin our show. And that is, if you could tell us about an experience that has shaped who you are today. Maybe it continues to influence you somehow or informs your work and who you are.
So that's honestly a difficult question, because you want to nail it down to one. I'd say in general, I would say each and every conversation I had over the course of my professional life, and probably outside of my professional life. I think this is what shapes you, because it's your learning journey, your growing up journey, literally, as a person professionally and as a person in itself. Much like you, I was fired at one point, not so long ago. So that probably is the experience that led me to ultimately found Over a Cup of Coffee, because it gave me freedom, and it gave me freedom to explore it. It changed my life, because I committed to a relationship, got married along the way, moved to the UK full time, and was able to have conversations that I wasn't, outside of a boardroom or meeting room, outside of my professional life, that kind of inspired me to do what I'm doing today.
So I'm going to raise my hand, as always, and ask you to elaborate, because I met you earlier and we learned about the cup of coffee, but explain to the audience what it is, that it's not a podcast. It's something much more
No, it's
exciting,
not a podcast.
intriguing, that caught my interest when I heard about it.
So, Over a Cup of Coffee is not a podcast. Actually, that's the second podcast I'm doing in my life, and I'm,
Oh, wow.
positively anxious about it. Um, so what it is, it kind of sits in the space somewhere between coaching, consulting. It's none of all of that. It's giving people the opportunity to spend an hour with me, to come with a question, a problem they have professionally, not necessarily around, personal matters. I leave that to qualified therapists or other people, and discuss, get an hour of my time, get an hour of my curiosity, which I naturally am, and ultimately get the opportunity to gain more clarity around what they're bringing, which is not necessarily what we end up talking about. Actually, more often than not, it's something else. Um, all of that with an emphasis on accessibility, because, I don't ask people to commit to a program, to a length of time, they don't need to do any form of subscription or anything. That's one part of the accessibility. And the other part is that my situation allows me to price that hour to the person, in the sense of that I ask them to pay for the coffee. That's part of the branding, let's say, or they actually do, and also pay me an hour of their time, what their time is worth, whether, they have an hourly rate or, sometimes it's a bit self-determined, because it was really coming out of the conversations I talked about before that I was able to have after I left my job, or was left, or whatever you want to call it, um, that there is a space where I could help people that sits somewhere between the guys who do that. I wouldn't say on a I am professional, but on a more formalized space, and I don't want to take their space. I will also refer anybody to a professional business coach, or even, a therapist or consultant, if I feel or if I see that fit. Does that
Mm-hmm.
explain?
Yes, yes, and thank you, because it is fascinating and how it's like a very unique concept in the world of having conversations. So, and I've always thought it
Yeah.
was very courageous too, because you are always in a state of discovery, yeah, which we all do when we're doing our work, but that's a little more amazing what you decide to do and have courage.
And I think, because Jerome asked earlier, I mean, and I was fascinated by narrative's origin story. Actually, I talked about
Mm.
it with my brother this morning. Um, so technically, the origin story of Over a Cup of Coffee was a joiner that worked in the house here.
Mm.
And because I had time, I spent a lot of time talking to him. And he had left his job in software, I believe it was, to follow his passion and open this joinery business. And I was one of his first clients, I believe. And after he finished, and because we talked so much, and I was very, I'm very investigative when it comes to my curiosity, asking questions. He actually asked me, hey, would I take the time to sit with him, because he wasn't sure whether his business was viable, sustainable. And we had that conversation. So that was actually probably the first over the cup of coffee conversation I had.
Hmm.
And then it branched out in a lot of different topics, but that was my origin story, if you will.
Yeah.
Not as fascinating as narratives, but
Ah,
that's a little.
every origin story is fascinating to me. So,
Yeah, and it's often, what the through line that I'm seeing so far, and also in our previous conversation, is, the I think you started out by saying, the conversations, every single conversation you've had has been influential, right? And has kind of led you to the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And here you are, in your home, talking to this person who's fixing something, and and again, it's sort of that conversation that then leads to, oh, well, you know what? Maybe I can advise you on this, and discovering that it seems to me, and maybe you can kind of elaborate on this too, but it seems to me that the fact that you are not sort of super close to this person seems to actually work in your benefit or in their benefit, however that works. But it's kind of a win-win because that person seems to be quite open to saying, I'm not sure about this business. Did I make the right move? Should I be doing this? Should I be doing that? And sometimes I find this in my personal life that it's kind of easier maybe to talk about things that are there to a person that doesn't have much of a skin in the game, right? And
Well, yeah,
and so I wonder how that factors into what you've seen so far.
yeah. I so I think you're right. I have no stake in the outcome, and I
Mm,
don't want to have a stake in the outcome because again, that gives me the space I need to do what I want to do with that person or what I want to contribute. Is not having a skin in the game. And
mm,
I'm also not promising, eternal success, millions, what have yous, 7 ways to get rich in a minute and all of that. I don't, A, because I believe I can't, and B, also because I want to really make sure that whoever talks to me has the biggest possible space to really explore the topic they're coming with together with me. And again, as I said before, I would say in the majority of the conversations we have, the I send a little prep sheet, what do you want to discuss, blah, 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 is really not what we're ending up discussing, because there's
mm,
always, I think that's the other
mm,
thing. I'm really curious about what's really going on,
mm,
because
mm,
very, very often, oh, I can't get a job. Something's wrong with my CV. That's not what's going on, and there are people out there who fix CVs, and there's AI, obviously, but that is not what's actually going on. There's in that case, I'm thinking, oh, there was level of insecurity and there was probably also expectations that didn't meet what the person wanted to invest, and stuff like that. And I think
mm,
that is when you get to that layer of why are we actually talking? You know,
mm,
why are we sitting here? That's when it becomes interesting. And that's what helps the person to gain a little bit more clarity or a little bit more clarity, around the topic they came to discuss. I think that's the important bit there.
mm. That's interesting. I wonder what else. One of my questions was going to be about, when you bring that level of curiosity, and
Mm.
you've just answered in, certainly here something else emerges, right? Something that is really what's really going on. You get to the heart of it. But I wonder now, having had however many conversations you've had with people, do you sort of see a bit of a pattern with? I mean, this podcast doesn't claim to be scientific or anything like that. So I just want to guard against that. We're not doing official research for PhD or
Yes, no
anything
data
here.
analytics will be used during this podcast.
That's right, exactly. But just out of for my own
Yeah.
benefit, I'm curious always when people do something with consistency, like what you're doing, and you've
Mhm.
met a variety of different people from different backgrounds, etc. Do you see some kind of pattern about human beings, just that you've noticed, or something you've learned about human beings as
Oh
a
yeah.
as a as a as a result of having these conversations?
So I learned a lot, and I'm not claiming that I have enough conversations to be statistically relevant on any of the findings. But I was like, I was holding my breath, but then you said what you learned. Yes, I did learn. And I'm trying to really what I learn, as you've seen, I try to put a lot of content on my Instagram, my LinkedIn, and that's part of the fun for me as well, because I can expand on what I learn. I mean,
Mm,
there's a couple of things I think people avoid sometimes the obvious questions, when it's career or business related, more career or business related, and that's maybe a little bit more European than it is American. The money question always takes, goes a little bit into the background,
mm,
and I'm able, because of the concept, I'm able to say, dude, this is not going to work because, you have to earn a living, you have a mortgage,
Mm.
I mean, all of those things. I think the other thing is that, and I probably, we spoke about that, and I'm very allergic to this, get rich in 7 steps, motivational posters, walking over coals type of things. Not that I haven't sat in those seminars and not that I haven't read those books, but I mean that, you look like, I'm sorry, no shame, but
Well,
um,
it fits with your curiosity. At least you
if
were
it's my
curious enough to go
curiosity,
and check them out.
I
Yeah.
I feel, and I just had a conversation this weekend. I feel with social media, everything that's out there,
Mm,
people think that they have to be something in order to be worth something. And
mm,
that pains me because
mm,
and I think, that's just me being me. I'd be generally interested, whether you're flipping burgers at McDonald's or you're running a Fortune 500 company. I'm interested in you.
mm,
I don't care. But there's this whole, I think social media plays a major role in that, where
mm,
people put themselves out there and typically don't put their flaws out there, or they come up with stories, and filters and stuff like that, all of that. And people forget that my next content series is probably going to be around bigger isn't always better.
mm,
Or you don't have to be, there's this thing in your mind, I need to be a president, I need to be a CEO, I need to be whatever, while you actually don't want that. What you want to be is somebody who's great and content in life, and makes a living, but it doesn't necessarily need to be that big thing, and
mm,
and same goes. I just got permission from one of my conversations to use that bit where, somebody was talking about, oh, I'm thinking about renting this larger shop, and we were going through the conversation. Actually, you have a very tight run, small business that works for you. It works for you. Why actually do you want to take the risk that naturally comes with scaling up?
mm,
And we found out actually there was no reason, you know.
mm,
So sometimes learning is learning to be happy in what you are, or be
mm,
happy again in what you are, is a huge relief and a huge, amount of clarity, that helps you going forward.
mm,
So, one word came to mind when you were sharing this, and even a few minutes ago when you made the comment about speaking to somebody in a fast food, in a restaurant, a service worker, or
Mm.
anybody. It's the act of acknowledgement and paying attention and appreciating. You're not saying I'm going to be their best friend all the time, or I may not even see them again. But in that interaction, that you're acknowledging that person is more than that label, and they're more than their title. And I was thinking about, like, what if we all practice that and made an intention about doing that? And think about all the people we encounter on a day. We get on a plane, you see the person sweeping the floor, just acknowledge them. Yeah, not even in always conversation, just acknowledging their presence.
mm,
And I think that goes without being too esoteric, Julian. I think it comes back to you if you do.
Mm.
mm,
It
mhm,
comes. I make a point, and it's also part of my education on and learning from people in my job and on my in my professional career. Just the fact to address people by their name. If they wear a name, if they wear a name tag, why not say, hey, and they say, how are you? I'm good. How are you, Julianne? You know,
mm,
oh, thank you, Julianne, for the coffee. I mean, it goes such a long way, and it's underestimated that treating people well, you know, is going to come back to you, to the point of commercially come back to you,
Mm.
to the point of maybe karma. I don't want to go there because,
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. The other thing that I was kind of thinking about as you were saying, Julian, about talking about acknowledgement and that simple act of acknowledging someone. I was also thinking about gratitude, and what you were saying, Martin, about sort of learning to be happy with what you have, or realizing that what you have is enough. In a society. I mean, you've mentioned social media. There's a lot of external pressures and reasons to strive, right? We must be ambitious. We must be at the top of the ladder, or things like that. And there's a lot of people who naturally have that ambition, and that's who they are. There's also a lot of people that's not who they are, and they still feel like that's who they should be. And so I love that you are able to sort of support people in kind of seeing that for themselves. And it makes me wonder, is that something that you learned for yourself, Martin, to sort of be, oh, I've got enough, I'm happy with this, before you started this endeavor, or was this something that happened through these conversations? Maybe I'm just curious about that. If that's something that's landed in your own life.
certainly has. My mom was over last week, and at one point she asked me, now that you are, you do your project, but other than that, you're a housewife, I would say real housewife of Nottingham. Um,
I want to watch
don't you
that show.
miss, yeah, don't you miss all of that? So, all of the titles and everything that came with my job. No, I don't. I really, really don't. I also do not feel less because, I don't carry a title anymore, or I'm not whatever. I don't. Was it a learning experience? Yes. And I think, in all honesty, did I have my attitudes over the years? 100%. Did I act like a famous English curse word starts with a C? 100%. And I think you have to give yourself also room to make those experiences, because otherwise, how are you going to learn? And I told you in our other conversation also, I look at it every day. When I left the company I worked for a very long time, my team gave me a picture, which is a sketch, a drawing of me made out of quotes. One of is an F word, which I don't know how it got in there, but it's titled "The Devil Wears Prada." And I think in 2 days or so, episode 2 comes up, and that's a dichotomy of me. That my team, apparently saw me as the devil. I still wear Prada, honestly, and proudly. But I see that as a badge of honor, because that's me. I'm sure I've been a devil, and I'm sure I've been entitled, and I'm sure I've been a prick, but I hopefully learned not to be one for the rest of my life. And I learned also that you said acknowledgement, Julianne. The acknowledgement of the people I work with and have the pleasure to work with now is what is actually the thing that rewards me. No title, not all that fluff, and no ballroom in the world.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
had to put that in there.
I want to
Yeah.
just also lift a phrase that you use that we are all guilty of hearing from others and sometimes using in our own lives. I'm only a. It's a very, I want to say, more Western term when we hear people describing their work, what they do. A lot of times you were saying about your mom chiding you about you're a housewife in Nottingham. I'm only a. And
Yeah.
how much does that do? How much damage does that do if that's the phrase we're carrying around with us? So that's the other thing we could be championing, to course correct that in ourselves and in others when we hear I'm only a, and
And I
elevate
think,
them in a different ways.
I think if I may, this, I had one of my in the shower revelations this morning, because I was thinking, I'm very good at thinking in the shower. It's always been like
Okay.
that.
We learn more
Um,
about you every minute.
yeah, more than you ever bargained for. But I'm European, I always have that as an excuse. I thought about something I learned actually from my coach. My coach pushed that quite a bit with me, and I was very resistant. There was the use of the word and, A-N-D,
Mm.
to look at things more integrative, that two things can be true at the same time, and that the true power, and intelligence with people lies in being able to hold two opposing contradictory things at the same time and still function. And I think that's so powerful that I can be a housewife, and still be, a somebody who works in a business, and has something to say, or
Mhm.
that you can be anxious, and still show up like I did today. All of those, and I think that's also one of the huge misconceptions. It's not obviously none of us invented a concept. It's a lot of people wrote about it, but I think it's very impactful, and it's something that I use in my conversations also to dissolve contradictions that people have in their head. Oh, I can't be one conversation. I can't live out my creative side and be commercially viable or
Mm. Mm.
successful.
Mm.
And we
Yeah.
found a way that it's possible. The minute you put the word "and" there,
Mm.
changes a lot.
Hmm. I love
If
that.
that,
Brilliant.
I love that. Yeah, that's great. There was just I'm looking at the clock here, but there was one thing I just wanted to
mm,
add here because when you were talking about your own journey and what you've learned through the process um and that hopefully you've learned something to integrate and we contain multitudes and all the stuff we've just been talking about. I was also thinking that when you have these conversations over a cup of coffee and people start revealing things that then make you think, oh well, so then why are you doing that
yeah,
if that's the real reason you're doing something. There's an element of I would imagine that you have to give a little bit of tough love, that it's sort of like you really have to question somebody in a way that is confronting for them because that way they can sort of see it, right? And it sounds to me like your own experience, et cetera, and everything that has led to where you are now, that's you're bringing all of who you are, is my point. It sounds like to these conversations.
I hope so.
Yeah.
And that also includes that, people might not like that.
Mm,
But that's, what I'm offering. And the good thing is they
sure.
only have to see me for 1 hour and never see me again. Um, but I think, again, that for me is this during my reflection on what I'm going to do with my life, my coach was very encouraging, say, "Oh, why don't you want to become a coach?" And it never felt right for me because
Mm,
I would have had to leave exactly those parts out in order to be professional. And that's
Mm.
important. If you go through
mm,
coaching, you're not gonna tell people, well, if you really want that, you need to get a haircut. I can, and I do. Um, and I actually I did a level 2 counseling thing because I thought, oh, maybe I want to, go there. And nah, it's not for
mm,
me because that's not where I feel I can add value. And
right.
I think I have the luxury to determine that space, and then people like it or not, and they might book a second hour or they don't. And they
Yeah.
will leave, hopefully with more clarity anyways. And even if it's only around haircuts.
I love that. I think that's great.
Joke.
Yeah, absolutely. No,
Well,
this
no
is great.
joke because I said it, but
No, I think it's great. And there's, we've talked about this before, but that level of authenticity, I think once people come across it becomes trust building. You start to trust someone if you feel like that they're authentic. And I think that goes a long way, sort of saying things that honestly. So I really appreciate that. I want to get to our last question here, which is really us kind of leaving the floor to you in terms of where can people find you, and is there anything else you want to leave people with?
So where can people find me? I mean, I established in Nottingham, but then obviously most of the conversations I actually have virtually now, which wasn't the original idea, but it happens how it happens. You can find me on Instagram. It's over a cup.of.coffee. That's the only handle I could get. You can obviously look me up on LinkedIn. There's no website, that's me bargaining, not making money with this versus investing money. So those are the two places where you can find me. Also, because I'm hoping that I find people more in those places than I would through a website, but that's, a wild theory is still to need to be proved. I don't know. I think if something resonates with anybody, reach out to me. I'd be happy, to have a conversation. Number one. Number two is be kind to each other. I think now more than ever, and it sounds so preachy, but I really believe that, be curious about each other, because I feel if you are curious about each other, then you learn more, and it's less divisive. And I think we live in a world that's far too divisive. And because of my biography and everything, I feel we've been, we deserve to be further than where we seem to be going at the moment, and I just see more potential
Yeah.
than just being not nice.
Yes. Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, words to live by. Be kind to each other. Be curious. I absolutely can stand by that. So thank you so much, Martin, for being
Thank
with
you
us
guys for
today.
having me.
Yeah, it's been
Thank
really
you, really,
wonderful.
really. It's been a pleasure, and I'm so intrigued about what you're doing at Narrative, because I feel, again, it's maybe not a little bit out of the ordinary, but ever so original and helpful. Really
Mm,
impressed,
mm.
just
Thank
want to
you.
say that,
That means
and
a
by
lot.
you guys anyway. So
Thanks. Well, it's great to add you to our community and have you in our circle. So, yeah, really wonderful. Thanks for being here. Thanks, Julienne, for being my wonderful co-host as always. And I want to remind our listeners to find us on go to wherever you find your podcasts, and please don't forget to subscribe, because that way you won't miss a single episode. Also leave a review, because that drives word of mouth. You can go to our YouTube page, which I've mentioned before, and obviously narrative.com is there for you. We've got lots of resources, and that's where you'll find our entire archive of podcasts. So that's NARATIV.com. Right now, we are launching an initiative called the Listening Lab, which actually aligns quite a lot with this whole conversation we had, where it's really much more about giving a space for people to be listened to, so that stories that really matter to them can emerge. So you can learn more about that in the episode notes, as well as on our website. And we'll be communicating more about that in the near future. So as always, thanks everyone for listening, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
bye bye.
Bye-bye now. Bye-bye.
For more information on the narrative listening and storytelling method and how it can help your business, go to narrative.com.